Welcome back to another episode of the Unstuck Career. I am with Sharyn today, and we just met. In the past, we've talked about the Owl app. Sharyn and I met on Owl, and here we are having an actual face-to-face virtual conversation. But Sharyn was telling me about some of the things that she's been doing with people who are in a work struggle. Is that how you'd put it? Or
work deprived?
Work deprived. Yes. And I thought this would be a fun conversation to have because of some of the people that you've worked with, but also how you've worked with them, helped them figure out, recognize that there are opportunities even for them. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So let's start with, what is it that you help people do?
The one thing that always bothered me is looking at people in the corporate world who hate their jobs. I used to take the Bay Area Rapid Transit System in San Francisco. And if you look at people who are going to work and they've got no expression, they have no light in their eyes, coming or going, they could care less. They just have to go somewhere to earn enough money to survive another month. And I always thought it was really backwards because the IRS, they do these amazing studies sometimes, and they found that 1 in 5 people in the United States do something to earn their income that they enjoy. And to me, that was totally backwards. When you're a college student, okay, you're flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, but, when you get to be an adult, you get to choose what you do. And then the really awful statistic is more heart attacks happen on Monday morning than 6.5 days of the week combined. And I used to say people would rather have their heart attack them than go to the job they hate. And what a pitiful statement that is.
Yeah.
So I learned this from my brother when he had colon cancer, and they gave him a retraining program. And he said that he wanted to do construction estimating. And I said, well, Tony, what were your grades in math? He said, not good. And I said, exactly. So I sat down with him and I went over everything that it would take for him to be in construction estimating and showed him a way that math made sense to him. Mm-hmm. And when he went through the construction estimating course, he was number 1 in all the math issues that they had to do assignments in. But it was because it made sense to him. He loved cooking. So I broke down recipes that fit into cooking that he had to start thinking about math in a practical way.
Yeah.
So along the way, I started talking to people who were in jobs that they absolutely hated. And I thought, your personality, like my 10th book is called About Face, Traits, Telltales. And I can look at your face. You have a flatness of your forehead, which means you're a very logical person. So being in PR wouldn't likely be a fun job for you.
Mm.
Right? So I can look at people's faces and I can go, okay, this is part of your skills, how your face is shaped, how you can use that. The skills that you learn, the learned skills will make you comfortable in certain jobs, but maybe they're not your innate skills. And when people use their innate skills, that saying, do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right.
That's what I was focused on. So the book, Be Your Own Boss Guide, takes individual innate skills and matches them with a business that people can start from ground zero, maybe $2,000 in total cost.
Wow.
That's it. And they can earn about $50,000 a year. Of course, they can earn more depending on the job, the business itself. Mm-hmm. But I came up with these unique ways to market a business where people aren't spending a fortune in marketing and sales, that 90% of all the business is referred to them by somebody who already has their ideal client, but for a different reason. Like, again, in the construction industry, I brought people together who built fences, did patios, updated like anything in the house. And these people would come together once a month and exchange business cards. And everyone ended up doing 25 to 30% more business in the first 6 months than they did before they started meeting each other. And so I just got this momentum going in the community so that people didn't have to work so hard. They had the freedom and flexibility. So, you don't have to miss all of your kids' activities because, no, you have to go to the job. Or, you can't take a day off because it's your anniversary and go play in the city and do something fun because, no, you can't have a day off. You're in a crunch at the office. So I wanted people to start realizing that we're not here on this earth to work. Our main purpose on earth is to learn our lessons. And we can't learn our lessons if we're so stressed that we don't live our lives on purpose. So that reshifting of why are we getting up every day, and how many people actually get up on Monday morning, jump out of bed, and can't wait to get started with their week? And the answer is less than 1 in 10.
Which is crazy. It's crazy. So something that you brought up that I think is fascinating because I hear people constantly they're responding to some of my social media posts, and they tell me that, well, I can't start a business because I don't have the money. I don't have. There's one person who told me he needed, I think he said $20,000 to start a business, and I thought I started my business with zero. Exactly. And so it sounds like you're saying the same thing. You don't have to have thousands and thousands of dollars.
So what I did with people who thought they had to have a lot of money, I would have somebody who had a job in a corporation, and I'd say, okay, you take half of your lunch, 30 minutes every day, 2.5 hours a week, right? 10 hours a month. How long does it take you before you've shifted into something that you can do? Then I would have people go and work outside of the community in the business that they wanted to be in and volunteer to work for free so they would learn the business, understand the nuances, so they can come back to their community and start their own business, but they would have that kind of experience so that they didn't have to make all the mistakes that people make when they start their business.
Yeah.
So it was just a really unique way of being able to show people how you don't have to have a lot of money. Basically, you need business cards. Mm-hmm. If you're in construction of any kind, I showed this young man how with his own pickup truck, he could go to construction sites, pick up all the wasted materials, and then take them and sell them and make $2,000 a week.
Wow.
He had never made $2,000 a month, let alone a week. That's what was so wonderful in working with people, is to see how their entire lives could change with just a little tweak in the way they thought about their job, their business, and how they wanted to live their lives.
Yeah. I believe that there are opportunities everywhere. And when we get so focused on the crappy job that we hate, it is hard to see that there's anything outside of that. In fact, I have people who tell me that, well, I can't get another job because I need to pay my bills.
Yeah.
And they're completely unaware of the fact that other jobs pay money too. You can get another job, or you can start a business and pay your bills with that money. You don't have to keep your lousy job. And so, how do you help somebody match to something that they would use those intrinsic natural skills that they have?
So I look at the facial structure, which tells me a lot about what kinds of businesses would work well for them. Your chin is squared off like mine. So you're a bottom line person. So when people are talking to you, don't bore you with the details. Just get to the point, right? So in the book, I actually show people that these are the skills that it takes. These are the innate skills. These are the things that if you like being analytical, this is a perfect business to start. If you like being expressive, this is a perfect business to start. So the driver, you and I are drivers. I mean, we just make things, everybody else is still having their first cup of coffee and we've closed our first deal. Right. So, but not everybody is like that. For me, the hardest one to work with were the amiable personalities. So the amiable people have to have everybody happy. So how do you make a decision if you know someone's not going to like that decision? And you can't make a decision without displeasing someone. So those were the hardest ones. So that I had to actually work really hard for them to go, if you don't make this decision, these people are going to be really upset. So it was the opposite of what everybody else is like. Okay, you can make people happy. No, the Amy Bills, you have to say, you have to do something or this isn't going to work for you anymore. And so every single personality type has businesses, multiple businesses, that they would just do it naturally. It's something that's part of who they are, their personality and their normal way of being with their friends. And that was the thing that I found so many clients, like this one man, Jerry, he worked for Cisco in the Bay Area. He was a project manager and he got laid off. And he came to me and he was this guy, feet stretched out, 6'3", legs crossed, arms folded the whole meeting. And I went back to the back of the room after the meeting was done. And I said, I'm really glad you came, Jerry, because I met him through a speaking engagement. And I said, you can think about it. And he pulls the check out of his pocket. And he says, I don't want to, but I know I have to join this group. And it's like that whole shift. Well, a year later, we had done his one page because he wanted to do speaking for management groups. And he came in, he was so proud of himself with this one page. And I said, Jerry, I just don't think this picture represents who you are. I said, I want you to think about when your daughter was 4 years old and you had been gone all day and you open that front door and she runs across the room and she leaps into your arms and the smile on his face just was fantastic. Just light up his whole face. I said, that's the picture I want on your one page. He not only changed the one page, but he came in with a handwritten note the next month. And he said his wife, Dorothy, had him give me this note. And in the note, it said, I want to thank you for returning the man I married to me.
So great.
He had become so stoic working for this Fortune 500 company, I didn't even recognize him anymore.
Yeah. Well, and when I talk to men, a lot of times they'll tell me, oh, yeah, I can compartmentalize. I am not a different person. And it is not true. In fact, I asked them.
Yeah, exactly. You talk to, I had a lot of clients that were attorneys, and the ones that were my favorite were the ones that were the litigators, because whether they knew the client was guilty or not, they still had to talk like the client was not guilty. Right. So now you take that force and go home. How do you relax and be yourself at home? It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
And people just box themselves in a corner with those kinds of jobs.
Yeah. And we think, especially men, we think that doesn't bleed out into other areas of our life. And it 100% does.
Yeah. You ask your kids, what do you remember most about growing up in the house? And 90% of the kids will say something like, my dad was never there. He was always at work. I always had to talk to my mom because my dad wasn't available. And that's just wrong. I love today how men really have taken a front row seat to raising their children. It's really switched so that they have as much responsibility as the mom. And that's the way it should be. Our family units are so integral to the survival of our society. And yet people have been pushed to the point where family is not important. You have to show up at the job, like in the Silicon Valley, even today. But it was worse back in the 80s and mid 90s. They can tell you have to work 70 hours a week.
Wow.
And if you want to keep your job, you better show up 70 hours a week. And how do you have a life when you're working 70, 80 hours a week? No job is worth that.
Yeah. And we think that money is the payoff. And I talk to so many people that tell me that that are in very well-paying jobs, and they tell me it's not worth it. And I know that, but it's a reminder also that we can create the kind of experience that we want. We can settle for the kind of experience that we want, and we don't have to settle for something that's going to require 168 hours of our week, or that's going to be always on, never off. And it feels, we tend to believe that that's not possible, but it 100% is.
I remember one of the last years I was with a Fortune 500 company, and this man drove up into the side of the on-ramp to get on the freeway so that he could bypass 3 or 4 cars. And I remember just laying on my horn and being so angry this man was cheating. And a year later, I thought back to that and I go, why would I care? It was just such a complete opposite of the way I had, because of the corporate life, the always under pressure. I was in corporate sales, right? So as soon as you finish your month, it starts all over again. When you finish your quarter, it's like everything you've done is gone. And I didn't have that personality to really do that well. You didn't have the time to really build relationships. It was always, what are you doing for me today? And it tore me up so much that I became angry at almost everything. I remember being in the grocery store and a woman bumped into me with her grocery cart. And I turned around and looked at her and I said, what's wrong with you? You can't see I'm standing here? And I'm like, that's not me. People don't realize how working under duress completely changes your personality.
It does. In fact, after I had left my corporate job, it was probably maybe a month, maybe 2 months. I asked my wife if she had noticed anything different in me, and I had some ideas of what I had experienced as being different. And she said, "Oh yeah, you're a lot nicer than you used to be." And I thought, I didn't realize that I wasn't that nice. But back to what I was saying earlier, we, especially men, think that we don't, that those stresses don't leak into other areas of our life. And it 100% does. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And the people around you, in fact, I love to ask, even I'll ask men, if I were to ask your spouse or your kids, how is this environment affecting you? They're aware enough to say, oh yeah, they would say I'm totally stressed all the time.
Yeah. And we can't ask Dad a question because he's always thinking about business. Can't interrupt him.
Right. So before we started recording, we were talking about some of the groups that you've worked with, and you mentioned that you work with prisons. So how did that come about?
Oh, this is so strange. I was having dinner in this tiny little town north of Sacramento. And this man was sitting at the bar and he overheard my conversation and he turned around and started talking to me and we just started bantering back and forth, and he gave me his business card and he happened to be the deputy marshal for all prisons in California. Well, that's perfect. So, and that's a lot of what happens in your life when you're doing what's on purpose and what's right. Things come to you automatically. So I asked if I could call him the next week, and I called, and we had this wonderful conversation, and I ended up getting my book into, 3 or 4 prisons in California, so that when prisoners are 6 months or less with their time in jail, they can start working on building a business, so developing business skills, and the book Be Your Own Boss Guide matches the innate skills and the learned skills with what kinds of businesses would be suitable for them. So it was just a really unique way of being able to get people who have been stuck. So the one thing that most people don't even think about, oh, you're a bad guy, you go to jail, right? Well, when you get out of jail, how do you not go back to jail if our whole system is dependent on keeping you out of a job? How do you apply for a job when there's 2,000 people applying for that job and you're the only one that has a prison record? So
Right.
we have forced people into a life of crime. We know that there's a scenario where people are more comfortable going back to jail, so they'll purposely commit crimes. But there's a lot of people who aren't. And I met this man who had spent 20 years in prison, and as soon as he got out, one person hired him to do a janitorial job. And that man ended up, Mr. Chapman, he ended up creating his own janitorial business where he only hired ex-convicts. And he
So cool.
taught them how to do the business of janitorial work so they could go out on their own and have their own business. And it was so impressive because most of these people made at least $80,000 a year.
Yeah, which is probably
and
unheard of in their
unheard of for a prisoner, for somebody with a criminal record. And to think that they didn't have to worry and look over their shoulder every day to see if somebody was going to be coming after them for committing a crime just to survive and put food on the table.
Right.
That's the part that people don't understand about people who have been in prison. They're locked into the system, and we're not doing anybody any favors to keep them there. Like one of the people that I met, and I always say his name wrong, but he was a coach for the Chicago Bulls, and he created a ministry in Illinois where he went into prisons and he talked with all of the men. He found out that 90% of all the male prisoners didn't have a father in their home when they were growing up. Wow. And it's like, ding, 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 ding. Do you see there's a problem here that we need to fix?
Yeah.
And, and he said he kept trying to figure out how to penetrate into communities to be able to say, if there isn't a father at home, these kids have a good chance of ending up in jail because they don't have a positive role model. So how do we change this social issue? And it really is a social issue. So he was amazing. He got my book into about 6 prisons. And then I was on Facebook. One of the good things that happened on Facebook, I connected with Dave Mason, and I was always a fan of his. And I found out that he had a warship in Washington, D.C. that he converted to a training center for men coming back. I guess it's men and women, actually, coming back from war. So you have this war mentality, right? Survival every day. And how do you now move into our normal society? It's almost impossible. The PTSD is ridiculous. So how do you get a job and feel like everybody else who's in that business? It's almost impossible. Right. You're always the outside person. So I said I would give him unlimited access through ebooks, all of the Be Your Own Boss and Just Over Broke, which is another version. And because I was also trying to get people who were stuck in the corporate life and couldn't figure out how to get out. So I reinvented the book for people who had jobs but wanted to get out. But Be Your Own Boss is specifically for people who aren't working. Maybe they're prisoners or maybe they're just coming back from war. And so he ended up saying the ratio of military to starting their own business increased 25% in the first year. Mm. It was like, you just have to give people permission.
Yeah.
It's like somebody has to just stand up and say, yeah, you can do it. Mm-hmm. We have, in 1990, the study the IRS had done, they said that more than 70% of our economy was driven by entrepreneurs. That's people with fewer than 50 employees.
Okay.
So the corporate world is taking a back seat to what entrepreneurs are creating. And with the entrepreneurs, they're more supportive of the business community. So when you have a small business and you have, 10, 50 employees or something, you're shopping locally. You're buying cars and furniture and groceries and everything locally. So you're part of the community. And that's what makes the difference. The corporations, they're not spending their money in the community. The majority of their profit is going towards investments outside of the community.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've worked with convicts, you worked with veterans. Is your book tailored to just people that are looking to start their own business or trying to get out of a corporate environment?
There are two versions. So getting out of the corporate environment is be your own boss guide. And the just over broke syndrome is same concept, but it's people who are really struggling. So a lot of entrepreneurs don't make enough money to survive.
Right.
I one of my favorite clients, Warren, had been working with Sears as a major sales training for all the people on the floor at Sears, and he lost his job after 25 years. And he bought into a payroll company. He had never been in the world of entrepreneurs, so he was green, and he did everything I asked him to do, which most entrepreneurs won't do that because they already have these habits, and not all of them are good habits.
Right.
So with Warren, he grew his business 1,200% in 2 years.
Wow.
1,200%, because he didn't know any better. He just kept doing everything that I asked him to do. He'd go out and speak at the Rotary Lions and Kiwanis, we called it, the animal circuit. Every time he spoke at one of those organizations, he got 3 or 4 leads. He would close at least one. So he was at least one speaking engagement every single week. He not only attended the Chamber of Commerce, but he got so involved, he became the MC for all the Chamber of Commerce events. So people knew Warren, the payroll guy, and so he just developed this whole persona in the community that people would just flock to him to bring him business because he made himself a part of the community. And that's what people need to do. I mean, Rotary Lions and Kiwanis, tight niche groups, and they all support each other. You cannot promote your business in any of those organizations. But as a speaker, we came up with a title, Connecting the Dots for Warren. How you connect the community, connecting the dots. And we came up with a 20-minute presentation that he could do. And he had so much fun with it, and he was joking around with people. And that always makes it entertaining and makes it easier for people to respond afterwards. I'm going to say, roughly 200 people that I got to go out and speak in the business community. Once I got them to write 10 to 12 articles, which became a book. Then they got their book published because I have a publishing company. Once they had their book published, if they had competition, guess who got the business? Always the person who had the book. And they gave the book away like a business card.
Right.
So it just elevated their credibility, their ability to be in a company where most people didn't feel comfortable. They couldn't get into the company. So just came up with some very unique ways, which are all described in the books, and want people to realize, if you look back on your life when you're my age, I'm 75, when you look back on your life, what have you accomplished and how have you spent your life? And I have a very balanced life. I lots of times playing, skiing all over the world, and I raced cars. I got my pilot's license when I was 35. I had a great time no matter what I did. But then when I worked, I 100% focused on my work, and I loved what I did.
Yeah.
So that's what makes a life worthwhile. I have so many memories that's what I want for people to look back. When you're sitting back, you're on the front porch in your rocking chair, what do you remember about what you created in your life?
Yeah, I love that. So if people want to learn more, if they want to get the book, if they're in that situation where they can't stand their job, or maybe they can't find something, they want to explore building something on their own, what's the best way for them to either connect with you or find the book?
I am on LinkedIn, of course, and that's pretty easy to find me because my picture looks very similar.
That's helpful. So, and I'll put your link in the show notes as well.
Okay. And then, of course, I have my website, which is my name.com, SharynAbbott.com.
And Sharon is
And my,
Sharyn.
right.
Okay.
And of course, I'm on Facebook. I don't use Facebook like I used to. It just hasn't been as convenient as LinkedIn has been.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as productive as LinkedIn. Um, but I'm everywhere. I loved it when Google used to tell you how many results there were when you searched your name,
Right.
because I always outranked Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen.
That's great.
I love that.
Yes. So, well, good. I love the idea that you're helping people open up to the possibility that exists. The possibilities are there. The opportunities are there. And sometimes it just takes a uh, a shift in perspective, a shift in awareness, and we get to see that, oh, there are things that I can do that will align with who I am, what my natural gifts or strengths are, um, and match up with what the market needs, what people are looking for, or how we can benefit them. And the byproduct of that transfer of value is a paycheck.
A paycheck that often is much greater than the paycheck that people can get at a job. And that's
Right.
what most people don't realize. I
Because you're
mean,
not paying
the
your job a
people,
commission.
yeah, exactly. So when you work really hard, it's the company that makes the profit.
Right.
When you have your own business, you make the profit. So
Yeah.
the harder the work, the more you make. But when you're in a company, I can't tell you how many times when I worked for Fortune 500 companies, how they stole my ideas
Yeah.
and never gave me credit for it. Made lots and lots of money based on my ideas.
Sure.
And so when working for myself, it's like, okay, if I innovate this, then I'm the one that benefits. But the biggest reward is who you are as a person and how that's translated into your family.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, it's like giving people permission to live their life on purpose.
Yeah.
And that's really what it amounts to.
I love that. Um, this has been an absolute blast. This has been great to get
Thank
to know you a
you.
little bit, and I love your mission. I love your purpose in helping people live their life on purpose, because it's so much more rewarding to live the life that you want instead of the life that your company wants you to live.
Exactly. I had one time a client, I said that I was going to go back and get my degree in theology. And he said, why? And I said, because I think I would be able to make a bigger impact. Not that I'm religious, but I'm very spiritual, but I wanted more people to live their life on purpose. He says, you already have your church. It was that, oh, okay.
That's amazing. Well, thanks so much for spending some time.
Oh,
This
you're
has been
welcome,
great,
Ken.
and
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you. I appreciate it.
yeah, and just a reminder, there are possibilities everywhere, and if you want to look into learning more about Sharon, I've got links in the show notes. Connect with her on LinkedIn or Facebook or her website, and discover for yourself that there are possibilities for you outside of your job that you hate right now, and life is so much better on the other side.
Perfect. Thank you, Ken.
All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.